That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hello, welcome to episode 29 of Only Human. Seems like we just started yesterday. Listen, we're going to do something a little bit different today. I had a little bit of feedback. A couple of weeks ago, somebody asked me about the Blue Threat Proverbs. Said, love the Blue Threat Proverbs. How many of them are there, and where can we get a copy? So I want to talk a little bit about that today. So Blue Threat Proverbs, what are they? Where do they come from? Way back in the beginning of this century, I was working with the United States Marine Corps, and they kept using a term that I really sort of liked. When they were doing a mission briefing, they would talk about the red threat, which was the enemy, right? These guys are equipped with these kinds of AAA, these kinds of missiles, these kinds of aircraft. That was the red threat. And then the second part of the briefing, they talk about the blue threat. And the blue threat was things they could do to themselves to screw up, right? Things like poor communication, failed leadership, somebody in a wing position that wasn't ready to take lead. All those things were blue threats. So it came to me that this concept of blue threat were the things we do to ourselves, right, to screw life up for us, not accomplish the things we wanted to, right? So it's kind of evolved into mostly talking about human error, but blue threats could be a lot of different things. Long story short, back in 2009, I published this book called Blue Threat, Why to Err is Inhuman, How to Wage and Win the Battle Within. And way in the back somewhere here, where is it? Chapter 12 is the Blue Threat Proverbs. Back then, I think we had maybe 29 of them, 30 of them. We had 30 Blue Threat Proverbs, and they've grown. I've always wanted to be able to put them on a deck of cards. So one of the things I'm going to ask of you today is if you've got something that you think would fit as a Blue Threat Proverb, send it to me. We'll consider it. We'll put it through the sausage maker and see if it'll last. So anyways, today I'm going to start going over the Blue Threat Proverbs. You've seen a few of them. We usually do one every week. But today I'm going to start with number one. We'll go as far as we can go in the 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so that we have. And then we'll pick those up later and we'll go from there. So the essence of the Blue Threat Proverb are sort of one-liners, right? That mean something significant to us about controlling that threat we pose to ourselves. And so we're going to start out here with number one in just a second. But I have a real special announcement for you. And that is, I teased it last week, but right now, at this very moment, you can purchase an Only Human coffee mug. We're going to put the link to the vendor. It's called Fourth Wall. A lot of influencers use Fourth Wall because they have really high quality products. And you can buy either an 11 ounce or a 15 ounce, I think that's right, coffee mug with the Only Human podcast logo on it. I mean, you'll be the talk of the town if you've got one of those. So anyways, we're going to put that description in, and very shortly, we're going to have other merchandise. And the next thing we're working on, coincidentally, are Blue Threat Proverb t-shirts. It's going to have the Only Human logo on the front. In the back, it'll have a Blue Threat Proverb. So real conversation starter, all kinds of things you might be able to do with that. Okay, here we go. Blue Threat Proverb number one. Human error is not a victimless crime. Human error is not a victimless crime. The thing about this Blue Threat Proverb is So many times I've heard excuses, well, yeah, I'm not wearing a seatbelt, but nobody's going to be hurt but me, right? Or I'm not going to put on this safety equipment because I'm the only one at risk and I'm an adult. I can make these decisions. Or whatever variation you want to create for yourself on that for an excuse of not protecting yourself or not making good decisions. Okay? The point of this is that we all have secondary and third level and fourth level effects of anything that happens to us. Now, this week on Facebook, I saw a picture, one of those science guys put up a picture, and this picture looked like I was looking at grains of sand on a beach. And down in the text, it said, this is actually a partial picture of the Andromeda galaxy. And every one of those grains of sand is a star. And 99% of those stars have planets around them. Right? And there are billions upon billions of stars and planets in this galaxy. And then somewhere down below it said, doesn't that make you feel insignificant? Doesn't that make you feel insignificant? And I quickly responded. This was one of those times when I didn't have to think too much about something. And I responded, I said, small, yes, insignificant, never. Back to Blue Threat Proverb number 1. We are important to others. We are important to others in our family. We're important to our friends. We are important to people we may not even know. We are not only important in the present, but we're extremely important in the future, in all these multiple futures that could be. So when we make a mistake and we get hurt, or maybe even get dead, or maybe it just damages our reputation or costs us relationships, it's not just us. And the reason I made Blue Threat Proverb number 1, human error is not a victimless crime, is because it sets the stage for all the rest of them. We strive to be the best we can be for a reason, because when we're not only does it impact us, it impacts all those around us. And if you believe like I do, it impacts the entire world in the future in some small way. So we got through number 1. Let's go to number 2. In Blue Threat Proverb number 2, one of my favorites is everybody's weird. Everybody's weird. The first of all, it's the motto for my family. There are so many organizations we belong to that want to standardize us into soulless robots, right? I mean, I spent 21 years in the military, and for a while there, I was in the Strategic Air Command, where conformity is everything. Sort of, right? You better have your uniform looking sharp, exactly like the regulations say. Better have your hair cut. Back in those days, you better have lawn mowed if you lived on base. And really, there's even organizations that are non-military that are like that. They want you to fit in, which I get. Right? There's something about standardization that's important. What's also important is that within that standardized person that is you or someone else is a wildly unique, crazy personality with different talents and different interests and different ways of communicating. And if you've ever seen, some of us that are watching this may have been lucky enough to be in a military flight squadron. If you've ever seen Top Gun, you would think that all these fighter pilots are all egotistical and all look like Hollywood stars. Egotistical, maybe. Hollywood stars, definitely not. Some of the most deadly people I've ever seen in my life looked like and acted like Opie and Mayberry RFD. Their personalities shine through that envelope that they were put in. And so I think this is the Blue Threat Proverb that celebrates the internal diversity of weirdness that's within all of us. And it encourages us, as the poster says here, not to be a soulless clone trying to meet other people's expectations. Right? Be who you are. Be who you are. Blue Threat Proverb number 2. When we're not who we are, we can find ourselves pretending we're someone else. We can find ourselves attempting to do things that are not in our weird wheelhouse. And we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. Okay, Blue Threat Proverb number 2, down. Blue Threat Proverb number 3. There's several that are kind of like this one. Life is a mission simulator. Life is a mission simulator. So what does that mean? First of all, what's a mission simulator? If you're a pilot, you get in simulators that look just like the airplane. The visuals are out there. The sounds are the same. I mean, you think you're actually flying an aircraft, right? There are a lot of other virtual reality things, games and everything else that you can play. The thing about life is that if we approach it in the correct way, it gives us lessons in everything that we do, right? Everything that we do. So I'm trying to think of an example here. I'm going to use this probably multiple times today, although I wish I had different ones. But I have, for over a decade, practiced something called the perfect drive to work, or the perfect drive to anywhere. And what I do is, instead of just going out and driving to the store and back, or to work and back, I look at some little thing that I can do to get better at that task, during that task, practicing where I am with the resources at hand. And in so doing, I've got a list of 28 things right now, how better to use that little concave or convex mirror on the side, how many blinkers I really need on a county road versus a freeway, where to position my car in the lane depending on whether I'm driving in the city or in the country, what time of year it is, whole host of things. I've made something that's routine into a human performance improvement initiative. Okay, sounds really nerdy, but I'm nerdy. So what I'm saying here is, the more you practice improvement in everyday things, the better you will get at everything. There's another Blue Threat Proverb down the way that hits this one a little bit tighter. But if you view your everyday activities as opportunities to learn, you're going to find very quickly that there are lessons there that you can pull. Surprising number of lessons. All right, number 4, one of my favorites. When I wrote this 15 years ago, it didn't seem like it was as important as it is now. But here it is, Blue Threat Proverb number 4. Experience is overrated. Experience is overrated. So one of the most common misconceptions out there, especially, in just about anything, is, we're looking for somebody with a lot of experience. Experience doesn't equal judgment. It doesn't equal wisdom. It doesn't equal talent. All it equals is time, right? And in most cases, in my experience, looking at it through a human performance lens, we spend most of our time learning what we can get away with. Okay? We learn the wrong lessons over time. Okay? We build biases over time. We get attitudes of cynicism over time. And so experience comes with burdens, not just wisdom. Now, that doesn't have to be true if we treat life as a mission simulator. If we know that everybody's weird and that human error is not a victimless crime, we can take any experience and squeeze it for good things. Right? We can learn from every experience. But if we're just putting in our hours, we're just putting in our time, we will learn, but we will learn the wrong lessons. So that's Blue Threat Proverb number 4. Experience is overrated. Number 5. The time of reckoning is not of our choosing. Time of reckoning is not of our choosing. The world's a cruel teacher. She gives us quizzes whether we are ready for them or not. And, back when I used to be a history professor at the Air Force Academy, gosh, I wish I could remember this kid's name. There's a picture on the wall of a young Air Force lieutenant. I believe he won the Air Force Cross, helicopter pilot, on one of these things, Mayaguez or something like that. One of these things where one of our ships had floated into enemy territory, and they were trying to rescue the crew. Right? It wasn't wartime. There was no buildup. There was no training. And his quote on his picture said, "One day there was peace, and the next day there was war. There was no going back to catch up on things you should have been doing all along." And that's always stuck with me. It's weird that I remember the things he said, but not his name. But the time of reckoning, the time of challenge, the time of test comes whether we're ready or not. So almost a prepper mentality, right? Get ready, stay ready. Right? For what? Get ready, stay ready for the biggest challenge, right? Maybe an emergency coming that you never expected. Maybe a health scare. Maybe you're walking out to your car from the shopping mall and suddenly someone's there that wants to rob you, right? So I'm not saying freak out and worry about horrible things happening all the time. That's not the point at all. The point is that if you prepare solidly across the board in your life, you stay situationally aware, you know what to look for, you maintain a good level of fitness, right? All of those types of things will help you be there when that time of reckoning comes. We don't get to choose when we have to apply our skills, our talent, our knowledge. The world does. And so the more that we understand that, the more we will lean in to being ready when that moment arrives. And it will eventually arise. Blue Threat Proverb number 5, time of reckoning, not of our choosing. Number 6, one of my favorites. So in a lot of these Blue Threat Proverbs, I want you to know that some of these came out of the brain of Tony Kern, but most of them didn't. I haven't really had an original thought, I don't think, in my life. This one has been around for a long, long time. Some of them I can tell you where the original quotes came from. I can't tell you about this one, but it's Blue Threat Proverb number 6, practice makes permanent, right? We always hear practice makes perfect. Not true, right? It depends, once again, on how you're practicing. If you practice averageness, practice will make you permanently average, right? If you practice continuous improvement, practice will make you continuously better. This is a lot like experience is overrated. You can put in a ton of time, right, on anything, and you'll become more comfortable with it, but you have to practice like you want to become. You have to stretch yourself. This kind of leads into the whole discussion on habit formation, which we're going to get into in a later Blue Threat proverb. But it's important to understand, if you're going to put the time in on something, you should put that time in practicing at your very best. And what does that look like? If you're practicing, maybe you want to get better and you don't know what better looks like. Well, that means you have to do research. You have to listen to somebody playing that guitar better than you. You have to maybe study a different technique. All of those things that you're learning as you practice not only will make you better at the one thing you're doing, once again, with the Blue Threat Proverbs, they will make you better at everything, because they will cross flow into other areas of your life. So remember, when you're doing something average, you're practicing to permanently do it average. When you're doing something better each time, you're practicing to permanently get better each time. Number 6, practice makes permanent. How are we doing on time here? We're doing all right. We'll go a couple more. Number 7. I told you there was more of these. Habits are better than rules. Habits are better than rules. Why? Why? Because there's a lot of great quotes out there about habits. Probably my favorite one is, you don't have to keep a habit like you keep a rule, because habits keep you. right? If I've got a habit every morning of getting up, brushing my teeth, taking my vitamins, and getting a 45-minute workout, okay? I don't have to remember. I don't have to look at a checklist. I've built that habit into my life so that I don't even need that. Well, I do need the coffee, but even if I didn't have the coffee, I'd still go do those things because I've programmed myself to do those things in that order, right? Rules are restrictive and people push back against rules. I have always questioned authority, right? I think that's a natural thing for all of us to do. So when someone comes out and says, you will do this or you can't go there, all of those types of things, I want to know why, right? So following rules is not necessarily easy for me until it is. It's easy for me once I understand. I say, okay, that's a good rule, right? But not every rule is a good rule. But every rule does one thing. It restricts you, okay? Habits don't restrict you, they empower you, right? Can I go a day and break that habit for a day and not risk life and limb? Yeah, I can get away without brushing my teeth. I can get away without that workout for a day. But guess what? If I do it 2 days or 3 days, suddenly that habit that took me a while to form is gone, right? So habits are so much better than rules. I'll go one step further here and say, when people don't have good habits, let's talk about a work environment, they're going to get bad rules. Because if you don't have a habit of doing things correctly, somebody's going to come along and write a procedure to help you, right? There's something out there called behavioral-based safety. Behavioral-based safety says there's one way to do this, and this is the way you're going to do it, right? Follow the rules, follow the checklist. There's no leniency for moving left, right, or finding ways to do it better. So if you want to avoid the big rules, build the big habits, right? Habits are better than rules. Keep that in mind. The other good quote about habits I like that's important to understand, it says, habits are tricky things. Their bonds are too weak to notice until they're too strong to break, right? So keep in mind, not every habit's a good habit. Smoking, eating cookies before bed, all things that if you get into that habit pattern can probably be destructive. So number 7, habits are better than rules. Number 8, the plain things are the main things. Sort of like my perfect drive to work exercise. I want to get better at some really important things. I really do. And hopefully you all have a dream like that as well. I want to get better. I'm pretty good at public speaking. People pay me to go and speak, but I'm not in the same class with some of these guys that are out there. And I look at them. I mean, there's a couple of preachers that I listen to and I go, man, I would love to be that guy, right? There's some other guys, Simon Sinek, out there. I love watching him. Probably anybody on a world-class TED Talk. And so I try my hardest to get better at that one thing, right? Sometimes to the detriment of getting better at other things, right? Obviously, what I do, I communicate, right? I communicate in writing with books. I've got a podcast here. I give presentations. I do webinars. I do a lot of this stuff. And so I tend to focus on how do I be a better writer? How do I be a better speaker on a live stage? How do I give a better podcast? When in reality, it's all about how do I communicate every day, everywhere, right? Am I clear and concise? Am I getting my point across? Do I ramble off on weird diatribes? Do I go down rabbit holes and never come out? Do I tie off everything that I said I was going to talk about later and then I do or I don't? All of those things I do every day with my wife and heck with my dogs and my horses and my chickens and my donkeys. So if I practice great communications in the everyday aspects of my life, I don't have to go and worry about how to be different on stage or how to be different on my podcast. So that's an example that I use, but it could be anything for you. It could be cleaning up your desk, cleaning up your room, making your bed, returning emails, returning phone calls, staying in touch with old friends and family, whatever it is. The plain things are the main things. Our everyday routine, excuse me, presents all kinds of opportunities for improvement. And if we can establish those habits of excellence by practicing precision, picturing perfection in the plain things in life, it will naturally migrate across to everywhere else. Blue Threat Proverb number 8. Looking down at my clock here, I see that we're a little past 20 minutes, maybe 22 minutes. So I need to do two things. I'm going to cover a couple more of these, but first I want to take a 60-minute break for a word from our sponsor. We'll be right back to cover number 9, which is one of my absolute favorites. So don't go away. Hi, I want to challenge the aviation community in a pretty big way. I want to challenge us to reduce the number and the cost of aviation ground incidents by 50% over the next 5 years. There are many studies out there that have been done on ground damage to aircraft. It's estimated between $20 and $40 billion a year are lost due to ground incidents. That's completely unacceptable because all of these things are 100% preventable. We've allowed these events to become normalized deviants in our industry. And I'd like to work together with you to achieve this goal of a 50% reduction over the next 5 years. We've got some programs that I think we can help. One of them is called Aviation Maintenance Never Events, been hugely impactful. But I know that we need to get together to talk about this. And I think that the best step is to first issue the challenge and say who's willing to join me. Thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing from you. Welcome back. Blue Threat Proverb number 9. This is a quote from a pretty cool lady. Her name's Anais Nin, N-I-N. And her quote is, "It's hard to fight an enemy that has outposts in your head." And on our poster, I think it's up on the screen here, it says bad habits of thought are even more dangerous than bad habits of behavior. Because if you got bad habits of thought, it will block your ability to think through and reframe in order to be able to correct your bad habits of behavior. And I think this is especially poignant at this time in our history when there's so many people, including myself, struggling with mental health challenges, right? Anxiety, depression, chronic stress. There are so many things that get inside our head that we need to understand how difficult and yet how important it is to fight this enemy, whatever that enemy is. So there are a lot of techniques out there. We're not going to go into a bunch of them here today. I just wanted to give you the overview of the poster, but I will give you one. It's a sort of a mindfulness technique. When I get a certain thing that I can't get rid of in my head, maybe I'm worried about something, money, relationship, anything, fear, doesn't matter. And I find myself constantly coming back to that thought, that enemy, that outpost in my head. I will picture it in my brain, that thought. I wrap it up in a bag or box or something like that, and I just sweep it out of my brain. Right? When I was initially taught this, they said, imagine you're underwater and that thing's invading, and you just wrap it in a bubble and let it float to the surface. Okay, whatever visual works for you. But every time after that thought appears, I consciously say, there's that enemy, and I sweep it aside. Right? It becomes annoying, but eventually you do that enough, and that pressing thought, that thing that you can't get out of your head, will give you a break. Right? So when you get that way, when you get that thing that's stuck in your head that you can't get rid of, oh, I suck, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'll never be a good speaker, I can't write anymore, whatever it is that's blocking you from your objectives and your goals, find a way to fight that enemy. Find a way to fight that enemy. All right, we're going to do one more, and then we'll call it quits. I think 10's a good number. And this one is also a quote from a very famous person, Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor. It's Blue Threat Proverb number 10, and it says, own the decision space between stimulus and response. Right? You could wrap this up in 21st century jargon and say, don't hit send on that email till you give it a second read, right? Own the decision space between stimulus and response. This has a ton to do with emotional control, because something will happen. It'll make us mad, or it'll make us giddy, or something. It triggers some emotion. Emotions are powerful. They're drugs, right? They produce all kinds of chemical changes in your body, right? And maybe you're angry and you want to send off a flaming email, or you want to say something mean back, or you want to drive aggressively or flip the guy off that just cut you off in the lane next to you. And what Viktor Frankl tells us is pause, right? That time between whatever just happened to you and whatever you're going to do to respond is yours. You own it, use it, right? Far too often, as the poster says here, our experiences, our biases, sometimes even our training, surrender this decision space, right? And so we become if-then beings. If this happens, I'm doing this every single time, right? We have to be able to stop and think in order to use our minds, our deductive capability, our God-given experience sometimes, to be able to suss out what's going on and figure out what our best response should be, right? When we learn to do that, suddenly our whole life gets a lot better. Well, we're coming up on our time limit here for episode 29. Thanks to the reader that sent in, tell me a little bit more about the Blue Threat Proverbs. We're not going to blast through all of these in a row. We're going to go on to talk about some other key things here over the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about risk, not risk management, not risk control. We're going to talk about what our personal thresholds of risk are and how we can identify them and what that means to us. And then we'll get around to a little discussion of risk management. We're going to talk about motivation, internal motivators, external motivators. We're going to talk about mentoring, and we might even wrap that into a fairly decent discussion on parenting. We're going to talk about leadership, but in terms of followership. So we got a lot of places we're going over the rest of this year. Every once in a while, we'll take a break from all of that, and we'll come back and we'll continue to plow through these Blue Threat Proverbs. So a couple of things. Remember, get your coffee cup. Man, they're going to go fast. Second thing, please keep the feedback coming, especially if you've got something you think would be a great Blue Threat Proverb. Drop that email to me, or hit the website, or respond on the podcast link, any of those things, and we'll take a look at these. I'd love to get up to 52. We'll have a deck of cards that we'll then offer. Last thing, get better every day, no matter what it takes, where you are with the resources at hand, because only human is the biggest oxymoron in the world. It's not an only, it's an exceptional opportunity for us to live our best life. I look forward to seeing you again next week. We drop Tuesdays, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I will see you soon.